Hi, everybody. It's Dan Sullivan, and I'm here on this really great collaboration collaboration podcast with Kelly Knight and with Mark O'Donnell. And I was just sharing with them before we came on a new idea we have in Coach, which allows entrepreneurs to see to see how they're operating from the standpoint that they actually always have two companies. And the first company is the company that they've built up over the years, and it's great from a revenue standpoint, and they've built their revenue up. But what we're suggesting is that the company that you've been building for years is actually an R&D company that's creating the basis for really great intellectual property that other people would like to use your solutions and the way that you have processes for unique processes, unique solutions, and you can put them into intellectual property. And then you can plug them in through various means, licensing being one of them, and that would be your second company. And that'll be true now for the rest of your career that you have these two companies. And it really allows you to, on the one hand, insist on the quality of your solutions and keep making the quality of your solutions and the powerfulness of your team in the marketplace. And you're selling retail here. And then there's another one where you have very valuable solutions and they have big networks that they'd like to get your solutions out to their network. So that's just the sort of the 10,000 foot view of what we're talking about here. So Mark, when you saw this, what was your first thought? Because we've only been talking about it for about 15 minutes, and I gave
Yeah.
you some examples of six strategic coach pre-zone clients of how they're going about it.
So for us, I think about these two assets. We've got our intellectual property and we have and for us we have multiple companies beyond two. We have our EOS implementer business, our coaches that are out in the world and they're applying this intellectual property to those clients to get a really great results. And then that underlying asset, that intellectual property, is being used, yes, for the coaches, for the implementers, but it's also being used and licensed to software companies, to sales organizations, and to many others, where it just starts to spread and it's infinitely replicable. And it's just that asset that grows forever and ever. And the other part that reminded me, took me back to my background in pharma, and I was in a research and development organization, and we had one drug that you take has 20, 30, 40 different indications. We call it something different, and you take it for something different, but it's the exact same molecule and the exact same intellectual property that's the underpinning of it. It just has multiple uses and multiple indications, and some of them are $1 billion drug and some aren't. But that's just kind of took me back to that R&D is
Mhm.
really important, and it can be leveraged and used in all sorts of different ways.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Kelly, what's your thoughts?
It just feels so abundance minded, which of course is one of the central philosophies, Dan, that you run on and EOS does too, because you can take that intellectual property and disperse it in ways that are
Mhm.
such a huge multiplier than if we just did it ourselves.
Mhm.
And, we've had another core kind of philosophy that dates all the way back to Gino, which is we want, as an example, EOS to be on the lips of more people,
Mhm.
helping people make a huge impact in their businesses and help entrepreneurs get what they want everywhere. And so the more that we can enable our IP in way of our model, our process, our toolbox, it becomes very exciting as this second business or second company asset.
Yeah. So the question I have for you, and you sort of gave an enthusiastic answer, Mark,
Mhm.
about this, is that the second company grows without you really having to do anything because it's all based on the creativity that created the solutions in the first place in the first company.
Yeah, the as Kelly said, putting EOS on the lips of more people. Well, I love the saying, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes.
Mhm.
And when you're really incentivizing other creative humans to go use your intellectual property to add value to more and more and more people, it kind of just grows tentacles and grows legs and it expands way, way further in all sorts of unpredictable ways, really adhering to that intellectual property, but it's just spreading without you doing much. And we talked earlier about our new EOS Impact book imprint. We've
Mhm.
got 850 implementers. Many of them have a book in them, and we unlocking them to go and write books, use our content, use our intellectual property, put their own stories around it is us doing no work
Mhm.
and the message spreading.
Mhm.
What I would say is you end up with missionaries instead of mercenaries.
Kelly, from your standpoint, organizationally, how does this work for? I mean, one of them is well established. I've known Gino since he first started creating, the EOS program. You know, and we would have conversations every quarter when he came to strategic coach, and then of course you went through a transition. And in your role as the overall integrator of EOS Global, um, does this change the organizationally? Does this change the structure at all?
Doesn't really need to change the structure, but Dan, we've played in multiple camps as it relates to IP. So there was a time that we were more wild, wild west, right? We had IP and we were dispersing it in a way that wasn't organized and it wasn't well thought out, and it could be used in a way that's detrimental, right? If someone uses your IP assets in a way that doesn't look good for your brand or for those that you serve, that's not the best way to do that. On the other hand, if you're really restrictive with your IP in a way that it really can't blossom and flourish in a way that's making a huge impact in the world, that's also not really ideal. So it's finding what I like about where you're going with this is that there's a controlled method to how you're doing it, where there's the high quality and care in how it's being put out into the world, but done in an abundance-minded way. And so for us at EOS, we've been in both camps, and I think we've learned this middle of the road component. And so we've made changes internally, actually, in recent months to bring in someone who can see it from an entrepreneurial perspective. So we actually have an in-house IP general counsel that's been doing this for 20 years. And so she's really in alignment with the way that Mark and I think and believe that this is possible. So it's really ironic that you brought these tools today because it's been through, I would say, mistakes and being on the learning team that we've eventually landed here. But organizationally, the beautiful thing is it doesn't have to change the accountability chart or anything like that.
Yeah. So far, what I've seen, because ours is a fairly simple second company, because it's just that we're always creating new tools for strategic coach clients, and I'm the chief tool maker in the company, and I've really been freed up, over the years from the number one coach. I was looking at some background numbers, and in 1994, so we were 5 years in. That year, we did 144 eight-hour workshop days, and we had one coach, and and the coach was me, and I'd hit the ceiling in 1994. I just couldn't coach anymore, and than what I was doing. As a matter of fact, it was too much that I was doing because I wasn't creating new tools as easily because so much of my time and energy was taken up with coaching. And we were noticing already that we had to have levels of the program, that there were probably the first 1, 2, or 3 years you could coach at one level, but there were now people in years 4 and 5, and you couldn't hold them if you were just going back over what you had already created before. And I said, I've got to get freed up to create new tools, which I love doing. I mean, I'm a tool maker. That's really what I am. Yeah. Thinking tool maker. And so then I compare it with last year, we had 600 workshop days, and our revenues were 10 times higher. We had 600 full days, and I did 12 out of the 600. So I went from 144 to 12, but the company went from 144 to 600, and we did it because we had associate coaches who could coach it. But they have to be fed continually because they're going up in the ranks too. You know, we have signature coaches who just do signature workshops, and then we have 10 times workshops. And the next jump would be having free zone, which is the third level of our program. But it's all geared. You got to have the new tools. You got to have the new tools. And so now the expansion really comes from the creation of patents, of taking the tools. And in the last 18 months, we have 52 of our thinking tools that are in the program, which have become patents. So the Patent Bureau is finding something that they consider to be legitimate as a patent. And I can see this going on now. And that aside from creating the tool, I don't have any work to do because it goes through the IP firm, who are unusually good at getting patents back fast. Keegan Caldwell, Caldwell Associates from Boston. And then the Patent Bureau is part of our team, because they're the ones who, if people say, well, how do you know you have a patent? And I say, it's real simple. The Patent Bureau will tell you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's how you know you have a patent. And it's going to cost you 25,000 to find out, which is good, given the asset value. So that's my model. So how do you see it proceeding for you? I mean, because you've been doing this before. I mean, you're already doing it with the software, and that's the second question I have. Where does your software, which has been hugely software 2.0 has been hugely successful.
Yeah.
So is the software 2.0 part of the intellectual property that will go out and be licensed?
So the software itself, we have a really interesting take on this, which is that we're really, if you think about it, licensing our intellectual property to ourselves as it relates to the software. So it's using our EOS tools, it's using it purely, and it's spreading out into the world. And we're using that same intellectual property to license other software companies that have their own level of creativity that they add to it. So in a sense, we're competing with ourselves in some ways. But I really like the way you separated this out as really two companies, where you've got your base company as the R&D workshop, and you also had, it's not for you, for a coach, it's not going to go over 150 people with the Dunbar's number. It comes to mind when you say it. It's really small, high quality, and we kind of think about it in that same way. And then our software company and our intellectual property licensees kind of think about them in the same manner.
Yeah, there's no upper number on that. I mean, there's
None.
none.
You can just keep going forever. It's a 1,000x opportunity, or more.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. Any thoughts? Well, Kelly, you answered the question too, because Mark is the visionary, and I suspect a lot of the deal making, the actual deal making, with collaborations with other software platforms, and that is going to involve you doing that. But you're already doing that. I mean, that's that.
Well, it's evolving, Dan, actually, because now we have a team of folks on board who are doing this, because once we've created the model for the licensing, it's replicable. So I'm less involved now than I've ever been in that, which is a good thing. So, when you consider that EOS has been in the world for a long time, since 2008 really is when EOS was incorporated. And so for all of these years, it's been, used in pen and paper in some cases. And there's been organizations that have used all kinds of things like Streti or Monday.com or Asana or whatever it might be to actually run level 10s and use different EOS tools. And we've always said we celebrate, self-implementation of EOS, however that works for you. Well, this really embraces that concept because there are many people who have for many, many years been on different platforms successfully running EOS, but now they can have EOS language, like commonality of language of the IP, of the terms and the tools inside the software that they've been using for a long time, because not everybody will move to EOS 1. That's okay. We understand that. The marketplace is the marketplace. People become very fond of the programs and the platforms that they're using. So, from the perspective of scaling, the ability for EOS to be made available in ways that work however people want to use them is been really our mindset more recently.
Well, one of the ways that I look at it is that the strength of strategic coach, and it's the same, my experience of EOS, is it's profoundly a relationship-based business. It's a real relationship. And that'll grow. I mean, from our standpoint, it'll always grow. We've been in the market for 36 years, and except for 2 of those years, we've been profitable. In the 2 years we weren't, we were even. Okay, so it's always growing, and there's a lot of price elasticity in our model, and we go through periods for 4 or 5 years where there's no increase in pricing, but the moment we do increase in price, we've not suffered anything from it, and I suspect that's going to be true in the future. And but I would say the same is going to be true for you. That I think you have enormous price elasticity in what you're doing, as long as you don't do it year after year. I find, find 5 or 6 years is a good framework. You operate within a certain price, and they're used to everything else moving in price, so that's not a big deal.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
We,
so
we've Yeah, we have thought, Dan, over the years, and this again didn't start with me. This was really Gino from the very beginning, but you give a value before you ask for anything in return. And in doing so, we've given away tools for free so that the world can enjoy EOS to a certain degree, and then there's a lower barrier to entry to become, to enter into different ways to engage with EOS, whether it's hiring an EOS implementer or becoming part of our web-based platform. But when there's a spectrum or a rainbow of opportunities at which your check writers can engage, I think that's really a sweet spot because then again, in the spirit of abundance mindset, it's not exclusive only for some. Well, that might be part of the model too, in some cases, not the upper end. So,
yeah, I mean, for example, we have a free zone client who this year will do 48 strategic coach workshops, for the price of his one free zone membership, and he
Mhm.
can come to any number of workshops. And we actually encourage the higher you go, the more you have everything, so people at the 10 times level can go to any other 10 times workshop, and they can go to any signature workshop. And if you get to
Mhm.
free zone, then you've got the entire universe of different workshops that you can just let us know a week before so we can get your materials ready, and there's no extra charge. And we encourage that because they're ambassadors from the future for the people in the early stages. They're coming back and say, "What's it like up there?" And they said, "You can't believe how good it is up there, but there's some growth that you have to go through to get there." And
Yeah.
everybody wants to get to the top club somewhere along the line. And it's an interesting thing. And we said, "Well, it's costing us nothing." We've just developed other dimensions of great word of mouth ambassadors moving back, throughout the program and integrating all the other clients in the program. So it's a very interesting thing when you realize that essentially by being generous and being, I think generous is really the word. You're just being generous. That generosity really costs you nothing.
Mhm.
that's right. Dan, I have a question for you. So, what has it meant to you being the chief tool creator when you have members of, let's just say free zone or 10x, and they're coming often and they're able to add their insights. How has that informed your thinking about tools?
Well, I experience it in two ways. One is that when I'm the coach of the workshop that they're coming to, and it's like having co-coaches because they've gone out, they've tested it, and they're coming back and they're saying, yeah. And I found some other uses of this that I hadn't seen before. Well, I'm really happy, really, because it adds to our R&D. It actually reinforces our R&D. And I think the other thing is that it expands my thinking of what this is going to look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. So the more present proof I got that there's expandability of the intellectual property, the more it expands what I think is a growth future that I
Mhm.
can more or less count on. This is going to happen. If I keep it simple at the center, it will multiply. And so we don't put this into any formal basis because I'd like to keep any kind of regulatory restrictions or anything out of it. And what gives me the confidence is that we have registered they're registered as patents. Okay, and
Mhm.
there's a weird thing about patents is that there's now a software in the world that 24/7 every day is going around the world and, and it's looking for anybody who's infringing on your property. Okay.
Yep.
And it can do that backwards. So somebody may have been infringing on some of our patents 10 years ago before they were patents. But now that we have the patent, they'll get to have a firsthand relationship with our law firm.
I was thinking, Dan, when you were talking about generosity and what came to mind there was a story from Zappos and Tony Hsieh and really as the visionary and his integrator, his name's Alfred Lin. And what they found is that the people who returned the most number of shoes had the highest customer lifetime value. It's complete inverse of what you would expect. So my guess is that if you calculated the customer lifetime value for the coach member who comes to 48 workshops, I would bet that their customer lifetime value is much
Oh,
higher
yeah.
than everybody
Well,
else.
and they're not just talking to people who are already signed up for the program either. They're talking about other people. I would like to talk to you a lot, but I really have to have some proof on your part that you're really committed to this and
Mhm.
get into the program and we can talk some more. And that
Yeah.
that that has nothing to do with us. That's just his relationship. And he's got a role and we've talked about that role. And
Hmm.
he said, I just want to bring more people to your program. But he doesn't want any financial compensation for it whatsoever. I mean, to a certain extent, he gets 48. He could do 100 workshops
Right.
if he
And
wants.
if he did, his value would go up.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's the cost of 100 lunches, Dan. It's kind of a good deal.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a pretty good deal.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you used the mercenary. What was the second word you used?
Missionary or mercenary.
Yeah, well, they have a missionary spirit about them,
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's going on his own personal value that he's experienced from being in
Mhm.
coach. I mean, he says my life's changed when I joined coach. And
Yeah.
everything. So, I think, but the big thing for me is simplicity. How do you grow and stay simple? I mean, that's the fundamental problem that all companies have.
I
And
really
I
do.
noticed a lot of attempts to scale something comes at the cost of quality and it comes at the cost of simplicity. And
Mhm.
I think this two company thing allows you to be as simple and high quality as you want because that's always the first company. You're maintaining the integrity of the first company. You're making sure that everything is solidly built. You're making sure that there's a great value creation that's continually expanding because of the new IP, both the IP itself, but also the way you're delivering it at the personal level company is where your reputation is really established.
Mhm.
I think the idea of scaling simplicity is just super important because we've all seen complexity at scale. It's called the DMV. Um, right? You just want simple, simple, and then that's what you scale and grow. Anything more than that is just total disaster.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, and what I like about what you've done with this, your second company secret tool, is that nothing compromises your core focus. It's
Mhm.
still all within the same core focus. Whereas sometimes, as entrepreneurs, we can get distracted by things that look like they're in alignment, but they're not. And that's where insert complexity. Um, so what you've done is you're just aligning the R&D with the multiplier asset IP company, and so nothing is sacrificed in at the expense of doing that.
Yeah. One question I have for you, both of you, the other platforms, what are their DOS issues? DOS being that they have dangers, they have opportunities, and they have strengths. Okay, what's making you attractive to them in their eyes? What have you noticed so far?
Sure. Number one is software is really hard because you're changing people's habits. You're changing the way people are working, and everyone has this inertia associated with those habits. I think you had said one time you're 100% dedicated to the current set of habits you have, and that's true.
That's what discipline is. People say, I said,
Totally.
you're 100% disciplined to the
100%.
existing set of habits that you have.
Yeah, that's right. So the DOS issues of the software businesses are, well, we like to serve people who where we don't have to change their habits by too much and we can just amplify them. And so when you're the business logic that is EOS is very attractive to a software company because I don't have to change their habits. I can codify something that's pre-existing and then I can amplify it and spread it.
Yeah.
So that's really attractive to them. The second part is we have 850 EOS implementers, 28,000 companies who have had a paid session with an EOS implementer. We've sold 3.5 million books. And so all of a sudden they borrow our credibility. It's really super credibility for them to attach themselves to EOS. And so it's solving credibility issues, it's solving habit formation and change issues that they would have otherwise. And that's really what we're solving for them
Mhm.
in
And
a lot of
also,
ways.
yeah, and it also solves, Dan, for if you think about an implementer who's in a session room sitting with an entrepreneur in this leadership team, most often face to face, literally in person, all they really want to do is teach, facilitate, and coach EOS to the best of their ability. And so they want to remove the friction of any distraction that may insert itself into a session room, like that of a conversation around software, because it's just not that important from an implementer's perspective about what they're looking to harness and do inside that session room. So it really solves the problem that if we're able to have EOS in some of the most popular platforms that have exploded the last 5 years in terms of operational and project management to execute EOS, it just removes a lot of that distraction that they get in the session room so that they can do what they do best. And that's really help entrepreneurs and their teams win and get what they want. So it also solves kind of like, again, this friction point that we've had with I think our community.
Yeah. From an implementer standpoint, um, how does this work in their favor? Um, um, that your intellectual property is becoming well known in the marketplace, and and I'll pick a top implementer, someone who's always going to grow. How does this make their life easier?
There's quite a few ways. One, as we expand the common language out to the world and our audience is growing and they're at the top of the food chain, they are the immediate beneficiary of an increasing number of companies who want to run on EOS. They can raise their fees And as you said, it's sort of this value exchange. There's price elasticity with it. And so they can charge more because they are at the top. And so they will always benefit from additional lead flow. The licensing of multiple software companies benefits them in a kind of a really tactical way, which is they're focused on the leadership team and they're focused on the human energy and the team health and the way they interact, the very human component of that. And having software options and different technology that fits that unique business so the implementer can remove themselves from that conversation and focus on the work that they're doing, that's a huge benefit to them to have multiple options for that client to choose so they can remove themselves from that. They don't have to be tech support, and people who are experts in that can do that. And so that's really some of the primary ways they benefit for sure.
Mhm. It was very interesting. About 6 months ago, it was May actually, so that's 9 months ago. I was in Cleveland, and there was an EOS implementer that I went out to lunch with one of my free zone clients, and he was suggesting that we do the same thing, with coach. And at that time, I really didn't have the picture, but I'm getting the picture from you. It actually happens through the software company, the software platforms, and they're in the business. I mean, and it's good for the software company because they want to be expanding their offerings on their platform, and they don't
Right.
have to do the innovation. I mean, it's like the pharmaceutical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the really biggies. I mean, they're not doing any innovation at all anymore. They're just buying innovation from other people.
Yep.
Mhm.
So since you know that
Yeah.
world. I mean, the big corporations, I mean, we create a new product at our level and we we get $10 million return on it. Let's say in the first year we get a 10. Well, that's like a fly on the windshield for a big pharmaceutical company. I mean, if they don't get a $500 million return on a project, it's a waste of their energy. It's a waste of their time.
And it's
So,
highly, highly unpredictable.
Yeah, it causes all sorts of cultural wars inside their
Yep.
company. Anyway, Kelly?
Hmm.
I was going to ask you, Dan. So, what does this then prompt in you? How does this inspire you to think maybe differently about the role of strategic coach tools as part of software, whether licensed or not?
Well, my sense is here that there's a whole market for tools that the person doesn't want to pay to have a coach to get the tool. Okay.
Mhm.
In other words, and our tools are pretty good. We've done a pretty good job in the way that we lay out our tools, that they're a bit self-coaching. If I
Mhm.
put a video together with, I explained this new concept to you, and to my satisfaction, I explained it in about 10 minutes, and you got it just like that.
Yep.
So the books that we're putting out now are little quarterly books. I think this is the third one now where I've had the tool included, and the major book it's coming out in November, which is called Casting Not Hiring. It's got two or three chapters on the tool, and we explain why theater is a good model for entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And the reason is that it totally changes the nature of the teamwork backstage in your company. If everything is geared to a front stage presentation that you're making, and everybody has a role, a different kind of role, and to do that, and it creates a much more dynamic internal teamwork, and so your future is either going to be digital and strictly digital, or it's going to become more intensely human, of people having unique roles and operating like a theater company to produce a front stage impact. And we just started in January that every strategic coach um, member does a 4x4, which is the 4x4 casting tool. And we have 120 and 117 did it and they posted and we pay them $250 for every quarter that they do it. Okay. And, it takes them an hour to do it. And we have a little workshop that Kathy Davis does, and she takes them through. And a lot of them waited till last week, but 80 of them did it as a result of a 2-hour workshop. And now what I'm moving forward to is there are people who are gung-ho about this tool. And I say, how would you like to be a 4x4 coach? And throughout each quarter, you get together 5 or 6 people and I'll create a little coaching tool for you. And you take it through, log in their names and everything else. And if you do that, we'll pay you $250 for doing it. And what it creates in your company is the difference between the management structure of your company and the leadership structure. So
Right.
I'm sure we're not too different from you in the sense that we we have people who have been team leaders since they're 25 and they're now 50 and they ain't moving. There isn't any moving. I mean, if you're trying to move up in the management structure, it's going to be a long wait. But in the leadership structure, you can move up every quarter, determined by your doing, and you got a lot to do already. So we'll pay you 250. We'll pay you 250 for you do this. And I'm seeing the possibility of an entirely new leadership structure in the company. So that's the big thing. There's a whole bunch of things that are coming together with this. And of course, the patents, when we had them appraised and it came back and we had a number attached to the patents, that had a big impact on my thinking. This is property and it's got an economic value. And so it's changing how we're looking at the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But I'm getting an enormous amount from the way that your thinking is going because I hadn't moved down this road very far about the licensing aspect until I had just talked to you for the last half hour, 40 minutes.
And I think the licensing, with our software, we incubated it inside of our business, and we are now it's ready to fly on its own, right? And it reminds me the way I would look at that is a quote from Marcus Aurelius, and he said, "Does the sun try to do the rain's work?" And we have a lot of lessons in us trying to do the work of a software business, and we were able to pull it off quite successfully. But
You don't want
I
to do
wouldn't
it.
recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to do it. Dan, the R&D work that you just described of your team doing this, each completing that 4x4 is, I mean, infinitely fascinating for you and your own team. But, I do sense talking to entrepreneurs, integrators, visionaries alike, that there is a hunger for teams to have more capabilities inside their organizations to be able to grow and spread their wings. We're very blessed and privileged to be part of Strategic Coach, where we get to come and sit with you and other great coaches once a quarter. But inside organizations, really being led and inspired to become great leaders and managers, and what are the thinking tools to become great, I think is an enormous opportunity for you and Strategic Coach. Is how do you do that and then license that out to entrepreneurial companies who would happily get that inside their organizations.
hmm Yeah, and I think that I think it's probably entrepreneurial. I mean, not corporate, in the sense that it requires a total buy-in on the part of the owner of the company. This is one of the things that we discovered, and this is their baby, and it's the proper care and feeding for their baby as the baby gets older, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful to the two of you for one is that you liked my tool, and secondly, you've really opened my mind to where the conversation goes next between Babs and me, and our leadership team. And one question I have for you: what does this add to your thinking? The tool, the second company secret. What does this add to your thinking about? Because you're already going down the road, and I'm
Mhm.
just wondering what it does for your thinking of the I said the best way to get to the future is to ride the horses in the direction they're already going, and
Right.
uh, it seems to me that there's a very fruitful conversation between our experience with this and your experience with this going
I,
forward.
yeah, I would say for me, Dan, one of the things that I do as an integrator is align human energy, around, the vision, but also how we're going to get there. And sometimes as we grow as organizations, it's hard for the team to see with clarity exactly how the core business and then these other things make
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
And so I think what the tool gives me is a way of not only thinking about our own thinking, which is true of all coach tools, but really how to break it down in a very simple way and help our teams to see that the licensing work that we're doing is not in competition with
Mhm.
the core business. It's complementary too, and it's part of being able to get more of EOS to the world rather than less.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really what I'm seeing here. And all at our conference last week in Scottsdale in Phoenix, all the speakers came up to me afterwards and said, "I'm looking at my business totally different just because of this distinction." He said, "I hadn't, it was starting to get really complicated, and then now it just suddenly got very simple again." And I think that's the biggest thing is you put it very well, Mark, is if you can't keep it simple, don't scale.
Right.
Yeah, complexity doesn't scale.
It doesn't.
And the magic of coach tools is that you are so good at that, Dan, is you keep it very simple. They're all 8.5 by 11. There's no 20-page tool set that you're trying to get people to understand. You just are so great at keeping it to the bare basics of what's necessary and not one word more.
Hmm. Yeah.
Boxes, stars, and arrows.
Boxes, stars, arrows. How many million different ways can you use stars, and some circles?
And
Circles.
some circles. That's right.
Endless,
And the answer to
endless
that is an
possibilities.
endless
Yeah.
possibility of
Well, it's
boxes,
like
stars, and
how many
circles.
how many songs can you write with the scale? The musical scale. A lot.
An infinite possibility.
Well, I'm very, very excited. Yeah, this was very transformational for me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's great.
Likewise. It's
Yeah.
great.
And we'll be together to see you and walk this out in March in
Yeah, yeah,
Chicago. So looking forward to that.
yeah. First hour, we get and the triple play.